Have you ever been so tired that even your dreams start to feel like work? That's where Clara Renfield was. 34. City editor. Overworked. Overtired. Running on takeout and anxiety. Her apartment? A shoebox stacked in a crumbling high-rise. One window. Always stuck. And the walls. So thin. She knew the names of her neighbors' cats. And the names they screamed when they fought at 2 a.m. Sleep didn't visit Clara anymore. She'd lie in bed for hours, watching shadows move across her ceiling, counting the slow, dragging turns of the fan, over and over and over. And in those long nights, her mind wandered places it shouldn't have. Like the sound her mother used to make in her sleep, a soft, stifled whimper. Or the way she used to hum church hymns, but only the first few notes, never the full melody. Clara never thought much about the past. She didn't want to. But lately, it was as if the past had started thinking about her. That morning, she opened her door to a letter. No knock, no mailman. Just there, a pale envelope resting neatly on her doorstep, untouched by wind or weather. Her name written across it, in spidery cursive, black ink, almost trembling. Inside, Ms. Renfield, you are cordially invited to Heritage Hollow. Your presence is requested to claim what was left behind. There is a room waiting. Do not delay. Sincerely, the estate. That was it. No number, no address, no signature she recognized. And yet, something about that name. Heritage Hollow. It tasted familiar in her mouth, like a word she'd once known in a dream, but forgot as soon as she woke up. Clara turned the envelope over, a red wax seal, pressed with the image of a rose, wilted, upside down, bleeding from its stem. Her breath hitched. Her mother had worn that rose, always, a necklace she never explained, a symbol Clara had seen only once more, on her mother's casket, etched into the wood. Something in her chest twisted. Not fear, not curiosity. Recognition. That night, Clara didn't sleep, not even for a minute. And by dawn, her bags were packed. She was going to Heritage Hollow, not to rest, but to remember whatever it was her mother had tried so hard to forget. The road to Heritage Hollow wasn't on any map. Clara tried. She checked her phone, her GPS, even pulled out an old paper atlas she found in the train station gift shop. Nothing. Just empty green where the estate should have been. And yet, the driver knew where to go. A man with deep-set eyes and hands that shook slightly on the wheel. He didn't speak much, only glanced at her through the rearview mirror once and said, "Whatever waits for you there, I'd leave it waiting." Then he dropped her at the edge of a rusted gate, ivy-choked, bent at one corner. Beyond it, an overgrown path led into the trees, like a trail carved by something too big and too old to name. "I don't go past the gate," the driver muttered, almost to himself. When Clara stepped out, he was already gone. The house appeared like a wound in the forest, tall, gray, and impossibly still. Its windows were dark and long forgotten. The front door stood open, ever so slightly, as if it had been left ajar, just for her. Inside, the air smelled of dust and forgotten perfume. The walls were lined with faded portraits, faces she didn't recognize, but their eyes all seemed to follow her, as if they'd been waiting too. She found a room at the top of the stairs, door already open, lights already on, and on the bed, a small, leather-bound journal. The cover had her name, not written, engraved. When she opened it, the pages were blank, all but one, tomorrow's date, scrawled in the same trembling hand as the letter. Do not trust the mirrors. Clara looked around. There were 3 mirrors in the room, one above the dresser, one on the closet door, and one freestanding facing the bed. Their glass seemed deeper than normal, as if they weren't reflecting the room, but peering into it. She turned the freestanding one to face the wall, just in case. That night, the wind howled against the shutters. The trees whispered like gossiping strangers. But inside, all was still, until the whispering began. Not from outside, not from the hallway, but from under the bed. Clara froze. She leaned over slowly, heart thundering, and lifted the edge of the sheet. Nothing. Empty. But when she sat up, her breath caught in her throat. In the mirror across the room, her reflection was still bent over, still looking under the bed. And then, it smiled. Clara didn't sleep again, but something else did, and it knew her name. By morning, the mirror was back in place, facing the bed. Clara was sure, absolutely sure, she had turned it toward the wall. But there it stood now, angled just enough to catch her reflection in bed. And worse, she was smiling in it. Even though her real face was anything but. The smile faded as she blinked. Gone, as if it had never happened. She told herself it was sleep deprivation, stress, the weight of too many unanswered questions. That's when she noticed the sound. A soft, steady tick, tick, tick coming from the hallway. She stepped outside her room, following the sound like a string winding through a maze. The corridor was dim, draped in dusty curtains that muted the sunlight like stained glass. The floor creaked under every step, slow, deliberate, as if the house wanted her to hear her own movements. The ticking grew louder. It led her to a study, walls lined with brittle books and moth-eaten curtains. The fireplace sat cold and blackened, and above it, a massive grandfather clock. Its face, wrong. Instead of numbers, it had mirrored fragments, jagged shards where numerals should be. And the hands? They moved in reverse. Tick, tick, backward. It was 8:45 when she entered the room. It was 8:39 when she glanced back at the clock. Clara stepped closer. Her reflection in the glass pendulum twisted as it swung. Warped, like it didn't belong to her at all. A whisper rose behind her. Time bends easiest in broken places. She spun around. Nothing there. No one. Just the curtains swaying slightly, though no windows were open. She backed away slowly. Her hand brushed against the bookshelf, and a single book fell to the floor. An old journal, yellowed pages, written in a neat but frantic hand. The first page read, "To whoever finds this, don't trust the hour between 3 and 4. That's when the house breathes." Clara checked her phone. 8:33, then looked at the grandfather clock. 3:57. The pendulum stopped. The house exhaled. All around her, the silence deepened. thickened, like something had woken up and was listening. She put the journal in her coat pocket and left the room without looking back. Not at the clock, not at her reflection, and definitely not at the shadows moving just beneath the glass. Like walking in the dark, barefoot. The hallway stretched longer than she remembered. Each step Clara took felt heavier, like the house didn't want her there anymore. Or maybe it did. It just wanted her to go further. Down the corridor, lined with antique wall sconces that flickered despite being electric. Past portraits whose painted eyes gleamed slightly, too lifelike. Past windows that showed not the forest outside, but only pitch-black reflections. And then, she reached it. A door. At the very end of the hall. Tall, heavy, iron-braced, with a thick, brass handle cold enough to burn the skin. There was no keyhole, no doorknob, just 4 words carved across the top frame. Do not open this. But the strange thing, she hadn't seen this door yesterday. Clara stepped closer, pressed her ear against the wood. Nothing. No whispering. No ticking. Just an absence. Like whatever was behind it had sucked all the sound away. She ran her fingers along the carving, splinters catching her skin. Then she noticed something below it, etched faintly into the lower corner. A single name. Her mother's name. Evelyn M. Renfield. The breath left Clara's lungs. She stumbled back, her heart hammering like it wanted to escape her chest. That name. That door. Her mother had been here. Whatever secrets Evelyn had buried, this door was holding them. And then, a click. Soft, metallic. From behind the door, like a bolt sliding open, slowly. Clara froze. Then something touched her back. She turned sharply. No one there. Behind her, the lights began to dim, one by one, like falling dominoes. She ran, back through the hallway, past the portraits, whose eyes now followed her more than before, past the grandfather clock, now stuck between hours, past the study, and back into her room. She slammed the door shut. And that's when she saw it, on the dresser, her journal, the one with the empty pages, now open, now filled, with today's date and a new line in shaking ink. You stood at the door. That was your first mistake. Below that, a sketch, rough, charcoal lines. It was her, standing in front of the door, but the figure behind her wasn't human, and its hand was on her shoulder. Clara turned around. Nothing there, but her shoulder still felt cold. Clara didn't leave her room the next morning. She didn't trust the hall anymore. She didn't trust the mirrors, or the ticking clocks, or the way the house kept adding things. Doors that weren't there yesterday. Staircases that curved longer than physics allowed. So she stayed inside, tried to breathe, tried to think. But the window kept watching her. Wasn't just a view anymore. It had presence. Outside, the forest stood perfectly still. Not a single breeze through the trees. Not a leaf fell. Not a bird stirred. was like the world had been paused. Clara stepped toward the window. It was large, draped in pale curtains that danced slightly, even though the air was still. She parted them, slowly. And what she saw made her heart twist. It was herself, standing at the edge of the woods, far off, near the tree line, wearing the same clothes she had on now. Same hair, same posture, except she wasn't moving, just standing, facing the house. And behind that second Clara, a shadow, tall, wrong. It didn't walk into the frame. It unfolded, as if it had always been there, hiding just beneath the trees, waiting for her eyes to adjust. And now, it was looking straight at the window, straight at her. The real Clara stumbled back. The figure in the woods stayed still. She rubbed her eyes, shook her head, looked again, gone. But the curtains had twisted themselves, not by breeze, by intent. They were now tied into knots, shaped like open eyes. She grabbed the journal from the nightstand. Another entry had appeared. You saw it. It saw you. Now the forest knows. Clara slammed the book shut, panic rising, chest tightening. She turned to leave and saw something that hadn't been there before. Above the headboard, carved directly into the wall, the window always sees, but tonight, it will open. That night, Clara pushed the dresser in front of the window, piled the mattress against it, anything she could find. She sat on the floor, back against the door, heart pounding. And then, just before midnight, she heard the latch. Click, slow, like a grin stretching in the dark. Clara didn't move, didn't speak, but behind the curtain-covered glass, something breathed. And it was no longer outside. Clara didn't sleep. Not after the window opened itself. She sat on the floor till dawn, barely blinking, barely breathing, listening. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty. It feels crowded, like every wall was holding its breath, waiting. When sunlight finally bled through the curtains, Clara dared to move. The window was shut again, but the dresser had been pulled away from it, dragged across the floor. The deep scrape marks cut into the wood like claw tracks. She didn't do that. She knows she didn't. Clara backed toward the hallway, heart thudding like a warning bell in her chest. And that's when she heard it. A whisper, faint, wet, like breath on the other side of a wall. She sees. She remembers. Clara froze. It came again, a little louder, a little clearer. She was never supposed to come back. She pressed her ear to the wall. The sound was inside it, like the house wasn't just haunted. It was alive, and it was talking. The voice didn't sound angry. Not exactly. It sounded mournful, like a song stuck between grief and madness. And then the wallpaper peeled, right in front of her eyes. The floral print bubbled, stretched, tore in a jagged line like skin splitting open. Behind it, bare wood and words, carved in frantic scratches. She is the key. She is the door. She doesn't remember, but the walls do. Clara stumbled back, nearly falling over a loose floorboard. She pulled at it, out of panic or instinct she didn't know. Underneath, a hollow space, a crawl space. She reached in, her hand trembling, and pulled out a music box. Dusty, ornate, shaped like a house. When she opened it, no music played, just a whisper from inside the box. You open the window, now you'll hear us all. Suddenly, whispers spilled from the walls. Not one, many, dozens, hundreds. Some crying, some laughing, some just breathing. Like the house had gathered its voices, like it had waited for her to be alone. She covered her ears, but it didn't help. The voices weren't around her anymore. They were inside her. That night, Clara wrote in the journal herself for the first time. 3 words: I'm not alone. And this time, the page wrote back. Morning came, but it didn't feel like morning. The light outside Clara's window was pale and gray, thick with fog. The trees looked different, thinner, bent. And the house? It felt heavier, like every wall had swollen overnight, like something beneath the floorboards had grown. Clara stood in the hallway, exhausted, haunted. She clutched the music box to her chest, the one that whispered instead of playing music, the one that somehow knew her name. The whispers hadn't stopped. They'd only softened, blending into the creaks in the floor, the hum of the air vents, the rustle of fabric that moved, even when no one touched it. And then she saw the portrait, halfway down the hall, an oil painting she hadn't noticed before. It was large, framed in tarnished gold. A woman, seated in a dark green chair, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Eyes pale, almost milky. There was no nameplate, but Clara knew. It was her mother, younger. Soft, emotional delivery. Paler. Her face expressionless, but her eyes, they were begging. Clara stepped closer. Her breath caught. The woman in the painting was facing forward, but now she was turned slightly, as if she'd tilted her head. Just a little. She blinked. No change. She turned to walk away, then stopped. The air behind her felt wrong, pressed in. She turned back. The portrait had changed. The woman's hands were now unfolded. One was raised, fingers pointing, directly behind Clara. She spun around. Nothing there. No one. But on the wall behind her, new words had appeared. Scratched deeply into the wallpaper. She's watching too, but she's trapped. Clara looked back at the painting. Her mother's expression had shifted. Not just sorrow now, desperation, tears, fresh, painted down her cheeks. The brush strokes were wet. Clara reached out to touch them, but her fingers passed into the canvas, not onto it, into it. It felt like skin, cold, soft, breathing. She yanked her hand back. The music box in her other hand clicked open on its own. Inside it now was a key, small, rusted, with a tag tied to it that read, "For the door you ignored." The locked door at the end of the hall. Clara turned slowly, the key clenched in her fist. And from the painting, her mother's mouth had opened, not in a smile, but in a scream, frozen, forever. Clara stood in front of the door, the one at the end of the hallway, the one she had sworn she would never open. It looked different now. The words carved across the top, "Do not open this," had started to peel back, like scabbed skin revealing older, deeper letters underneath. Letters that pulsed it softly, like veins. In her hand, the rusted key felt warmer now, like it wanted to be used. She slid it into the lock. It fit, too perfectly, like the door had been waiting for her. The bolt gave way with a sound that was too wet to be metal, and the door opened, not with a creak, but with a sigh, like the house had just taken a breath in. Clara stepped into darkness. The air was thick, humid, sweet like rotting roses. No lights, no furniture, just a long staircase leading downward, into the house's throat. Each step groaned beneath her, as if it remembered her weight, as if her body had walked here before, long ago, in a life she didn't remember. At the bottom, she found a hallway, lit by flickering lanterns. The walls were covered in wallpaper, and the wallpaper was covered in words. Dozens, hundreds, thousands of carved names, each one deeply etched, like the walls themselves were trying to remember. And at the very center, her name. Clara Evelyn Renfield. Not just Clara, her middle name, her mother's name, one she never used. How could the house have known? Unless she had been here before. Clara reached out and touched her name, and the wall shuddered, not metaphorically, physically. It moved, like muscle beneath skin. The hallway twisted suddenly, walls pulsing, and the names began to whisper, every one chanting in voices overlapping. She remembers. She remembers. She remembers. She turned to run, but the stairs were gone. Gone, replaced by another hallway, this one lined with mirrors, each one showing her reflection, only older, a version of her pale, aged, hollow-eyed, walking these halls forever, alone, trapped. One of the mirrors cracked, the reflection didn't, it just smiled. And from behind her, the music box played, one soft, broken note, then a whisper in her ear, memory is the final lock. The mirrors vanished when she blinked. One moment, they lined the hallway like funeral witnesses. The next, they were gone. In their place stood a single wooden door, unmarked, untouched, yet somehow aching with age. The handle was warm. Clara didn't want to open it, but she did, because by now the house had her rhythm, and every time she hesitated, it gave her a reason to keep going. The door creaked open to reveal a room that shouldn't exist. It wasn't just filled with old furniture or trunks of forgotten clothes. No. It was filled with moments, frozen in time. A child's shoe, resting beside a half-drawn picture. A dusty teacup still half full, its contents never spoiled. A photograph of a woman smiling in a garden that had long since turned to rot. Each object pulsed faintly, like memories trapped in amber, like the past had weight. And in the center of it all, a crib. Old, wooden, covered in a lace canopy yellowed with age. Inside, a bundle of fabric, wrapped carefully, lovingly. Clara stepped forward, breath held. She peeled back the blanket, and inside was a small broken mirror, cracked down the center. Its surface flickered as she stared into it. And then it showed her. Not just her reflection, but her mother, holding a baby in this room. The baby crying, the house trembling, and Evelyn whispering something over and over. They'll never take you. They'll never take you. They'll never take you. Clara's heart cracked. This room, it had held her. This was where her mother had hidden her. Not from people, not from the world, but from the house. Clara stumbled back, choking on a sudden wave of sorrow and dread. The journal slipped from her coat pocket, landing open on the floor. Today's page. New writing. Written in frantic strokes. You were born here. That's why it won't let you leave. Whisper, whisper, whisper. From the walls, the objects began to hum. The room vibrated, remembering everything. And in the corner, something began to rise. A figure stitched together from shadow, smoke, and whispering voices. Eyes blank, mouth open. It pointed toward the mirror. And then it spoke in her mother's voice. One room remains. The one we locked, so you could forget. Opened slowly, as if descending into memory itself. The figure dissolved like smoke. Its last words still echoed in Clara's bones. The one we locked, so you could forget. She stood in the room of forgotten things, surrounded by pieces of her life she'd never known were missing. Each item felt like a heartbeat. Each shadow, like a whisper holding its breath, pause, cold and heavy. She knew what came next. There was a room deeper than memory, one the house had buried, one she had helped bury, without ever knowing. Clara stepped out of the nursery, through the mirror hallway, back into the corridor of breathing walls. This time, she didn't hesitate. She followed the pull. It led her to the fireplace in the main study. The one long cold, thick with ash and spiderwebs. But now, the hearth was glowing, dimly, like a wound healing too late. Carved into the stone beneath it, barely visible, to unbury what we buried. Clara reached out and pressed her hand to the carving, and the floor opened. Slow, deliberate pause, not a door. A mouth. A spiral staircase wound downward. Stone, crumbling, wet. She descended without light. The air grew colder, heavier. At the bottom, stone walls, and a single iron door. No handle, no hinges, just a symbol burned into the metal. The wilted rose, her mother's necklace, the house's seal, her birthright. Clara pressed her palm to it. The metal burned her skin, but opened. The room beyond was small, circular, silent, and in the center, a cradle made of bone. Inside it, nothing, just ashes. But around the cradle, carved into every wall, words, thousands, in her mother's voice. Over and over, you died here, you died here. You died here, you lived anyway. Pause, let that settle, then continue softer. Clara collapsed to her knees. The truth hit like thunder underwater. She hadn't just been born in this house. She had died here. And her mother had given something up, something dark, something unspeakable, to bring her back. But the house never forgot. It remembered everything. And now it wanted her whole again. Her memory, her name, her breath, her soul. Let that settle, then continue softer. The walls began to shake. The ashes in the cradle stirred. A voice filled the room. The house itself.
Stay. Be what you were meant to be. Become what we built you to become.
Clara stood, blood dripping from her burned palm. And she said, clearly, "No." She took the journal from her pocket, tore out every page, every lie, every warning, every fate written without her permission. She dropped the book into the cradle, and the ashes screamed. The house groaned, trembled, cracked. She ran, up the stairs, through the collapsing halls, past the portraits, the mirrors, the names that once whispered. All silent now. She threw open the front door, and for the first time since she arrived, the forest moved. The trees swayed. The wind blew. The world returned. Clara didn't look back. She walked until the house disappeared behind her, until the whispers faded, until the silence felt like peace. And in her hand, a single rose, alive, upright, blooming.